Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 271. On this episode, Megan Fitzpatrick joins me and Vic to discuss blade angles, grinding, and whether or not it's worth it to add a rabbet to a piece to help when dovetailing. It's a fun episode. Megan's great, as always, and we have an extra little experiment at the end of the show. We're always wanting to involve you, the audience and listeners of Shop Talk Live, more in the show, and in doing so, Vic and I hosted our first live call-in. A listener, Antonio, sent in a question that we thought would really suit a discussion. So we had Antonio call in. It was a fun experiment. Antonio was great, and it's something I hope we do more of. But let us know what you think. We're always looking for new ways of interacting with the audience, and I think this was our first big swing at that. So yeah, exciting. While I'm talking about interacting with the audience, I want to let everyone know that we're doing a live stream next Wednesday, August 3rd, to discuss a few things. The new issue that should be hitting your mailboxes that day, and we're going to go over the latest in woodworking news, and we're going to go over some router fundamentals. We'll just hang out for a little while and discuss woodworking and talk about routers. I hope everyone can join us, or some of you can join us, again, August 3rd at 3 p.m. It'll be on YouTube, but of course it will be posted to the website and to our YouTube channel after the fact. All right, on with the show. Let's just jump straight into some questions. All right, this first question is from Luke. Two quick questions. Every vintage plane discussion on this show typically includes a recommendation to throw a hawk iron in there and get to work. So what is a hawk iron and why do I need one versus another manufacturer? And I guess before we get going, Vic, we need to say that you do sell hawk irons, right?
I sell one of their irons, and it's only to support the wooden planes that are the builds that are in my book. So
okay, so
I just made
to get all that out there.
Yeah. I did that because in Canada it's very expensive to order stuff directly from Ron Hawk because of the duties and taxes and shipping and all that other stuff. So I just wanted to make it a little easier for Canadian readers to be able to get the blade from me very quickly and easily. So
okay, cool.
Well, then you should answer that.
Well, it's interesting because I routinely hear myself saying that. Just put a hawk iron in it. And the reality is that when you look at vintage planes, old Stanleys and stuff like that, the odd time you'll get a blade that's in good shape. But if there's any rusting or pitting on the back, especially the pitting part, that's the part that'll kill you because basically you're always left with a serrated edge due to the pitting. And then the fact that they're not flat and all that other stuff. So the hawk iron, the reason I go with hawk for those types of planes is that they're not too thick. Other companies make them too thick. And then you run into the problem where the little, whatever the end of the yoke is called, as that goes through the blade and then engages with the chip breaker, if the blade's too thick, it won't engage properly or not at all. And then you can't adjust it. So, and then you also run into problems with perhaps having to file the mouth open, where the iron is just too big for the mouth. Not often a problem, though, because Stanleys tend to come with pretty wide mouths. But yeah, so that's why I always recommend hawk irons, because they're good old-fashioned high-carbon steel, which I kind of, I think nothing gets sharp.
They're high-carbon, not O2?
Oh, they may have A2. I don't know, but I always go with the high-carbon. Okay.
What about Megan? When you're redoing planes?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I don't. I like to use tools. I don't like to make or restore tools, so I don't do a lot of that kind of work. In my jack plane that Chris restored for me, it has an old Stanley blade in it. We found an old Stanley. That said, I do have some hawk irons, and they are very good, but I also have an aftermarket PMV11 iron from Veritas, also very good. But I think for a while anyway, Ron Hawk early on started offering replacement irons when you couldn't get them from other companies made new. And he's also just such a nice guy. So that's who people started saying, get a hawk iron. It may have been the only choice for a while. I'd have to cast my mind way back to remember. But I suspect that it's a very good iron, but I suspect some of it is because that's the one that's been available longest. So it's what always springs to mind. But there are other makers available that are good. But I would, Ron, I have nothing bad to say about Ron for sure. So.
That's pretty much what I've always figured. I remember years ago, I think he was the first one to start selling blades. But you can get, so like you said, PMV 11 blades from Veritas.
I probably get them from Lee Nielsen too. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure Lee Nielsen sells replacement blades. Pinnacle sells replacement blades. I have a number 4 with a Pinnacle. But I did have to widen the mouth or open the mouth a bit.
All right. You have a number 4 with an aftermarket blade?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's
I just say I don't like restoring tools, so I'm going to spend my money on a shiny brand new smoothing plane and buy an old jack plane.
No, this actually was it was a hand plane that, was given to an old editor, Dylan Ryan, and then he didn't use it, gave it to me. And this is a tough room to admit this in. It is my MDF plane. It's just one of those number 4s that I don't know what is with it, but it just doesn't go.
So you use MDF, huh? I gotta go. I'm sorry. I'm out of here. Sorry.
Yes, and sometimes you gotta hand plane it. You gotta true up a surface or something.
I'm just teasing you.
That's the one for me. But what would you so Megan, if you are getting another hand plane, what type of iron or what type of metal are you looking for? Do you care?
No.
So A102 high carbon.
I don't care. I can sharpen all of them. So I'm gonna if I buy a new plane, I'm probably gonna use whatever it comes with. If I have a choice, I'd probably get the A2, but I can't tell you why. Probably because that's what most of my tools are. So that's what I'm gonna get.
What about you, Vic?
Yeah, I don't think it matters. I think, if you can sharpen, all of those steels, some may last marginally longer than others. Sometimes the metal fails differently, in different steels. Unfortunately, some of the, all that stuff we were talking about earlier that we wish we could just data dump. I wish I could data dump everything I know about blade metallurgy. But it really, I have blades that are high carbon. I have A2 blades. I have an M2 blade. I have all kinds of different steels, and it's like I don't know. I can't really tell. I just sharpen them and use them. So I think if we were on a forum right now, it'd be extremely important. But in real life, practical woodworking, doesn't matter.
I find that my students can make any of them fail very quickly. It doesn't matter. So
let's just say that the metal that the blade is made out of is not the limiting factor.
It is not, no.
All right. Well, let's move on to, I'll tell you what, let's go to, since we're talking about metallurgy and sharpening and grinding and whatnot.
Nap time.
Let's wake Megan up.
You're going to talk about grinding angles, aren't you?
It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So Damon asks, question number 2 from Damon. I use mostly bevel up planes and hone the irons to different bevel angles depending upon the purpose. I picked up a slow speed grinder and Veritas tool rest to help more quickly establish the primary bevels. Is there any reason not to just stick with a 25-degree primary bevel for everything?
Hi, Chris.
Hey, Chris. Everything I'm going to hone, even if I'm going to hone at 40 degrees. I'm wondering if there's any benefit to the extra meat behind the cutting edge with a steeper grind. It would seem that Veritas thinks so. It would seem that Veritas thinks so since they offer blades with a 38-degree primary bevel. All right, so he's grinding all over the place, different bevels for his bevel up planes, wants to just grind everything to a 25-degree bevel angle.
Do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Why would you recommend that, Megan?
Well, again, I like making things dull more than I like making them sharp, but it's just easy. Just do everything at 25 degrees. And then for your secondary bevel, whatever you think is necessary, I do everything at 35 and I'm just done with it. I guess your primary bevel will grow more. Your secondary bevel will grow more slowly if you have a lower primary, but I don't know. Because I don't like to think about it. That's why. And I have not found it to make any appreciable difference personally. But again, I'm not a tool guru. I just like using them.
Yeah. I just love that. Like that needs to, I don't know if it's a t-shirt or something, but I like making things dull as opposed to making things sharp.
Yeah, I'm very good at dull. No.
What about you?
You know, it's interesting. Yeah, the whole micro bevel thing is kind of like it gets really dramatic sometimes. You could add on top of that, the fact that he's using a grinder, and so he's using the dreaded hollow bevel, which the problem with I know it's ridiculous. The problem with any sort of sharpening discussion like this is that with an illustration, you can make the problem look way worse just by sort of zooming in on it, right? And so when people say, okay, if I put a 25 primary on, and then let's say I'm going to do a 30-degree secondary or a 45-degree secondary or whatever the case may be, this guy's using bevel up planes, so he could have conceivably quite a few different sort of ideas.
Sure.
The reality is that I don't think having a 35-degree blade and then a 36-degree micro bevel, I don't think there's any advantage to that other than now you have to create primary bevels at all kinds of different angles. Right. So before I was sharpening with a Tormek, I used a 6-inch grinder, which is a big no-no, and it was a high-speed one to boot, if you can believe. And
you call yourself a woodworker?
I know, crazy 6-inch wheel.
Works just fine.
And I used my tool rest was actually rusted into a 24-degree angle.
So 24 it is.
All my primaries were 24 degrees, and then I would just put whatever micro bevel I wanted. If it was a block plane, I would use 25 or so. If it was a regular plane and it was bevel up, I would use, around the 30 degree. And if it was a high angle, you use a 45, 50 degree. So it really doesn't matter what your primary is. All the action is happening at the very, very edge. And even if you have just a glint of a secondary bevel on there, that's all that's engaging with the wood. So it doesn't matter this guy has the right idea. I would have your grinder set to 24, 25, whatever degrees, and leave it there. And don't touch it, because otherwise you're faffing around with it, trying to get it to get in the right position. Save that for when you're doing your secondary, you get a nice little jig, and that will allow you to kind of hit the angle exactly as you want. And then, because if you think about it, the primary, you're just removing material. You're just getting it out of the way so that you have more room to put your secondary bevel on.
Yeah. within reason, you need it to offer sufficient support for your secondary, but
sure.
Yeah. 25 does that, as does 24 or 26.
Right. Yeah. Or 26.2.
No. Now it's too high.
No, it's too high. 4 is too much. 5 is right out.
That's right.
Well, but here's another thing too, is if you set, if you're thinking, all right, I'm setting my rest to a 25-degree bevel versus the blade, if the thickness of your blade changes, that angle technically kind of changes, right?
By how much?
Exactly. So
I don't know. That's geometry.
Yeah. But
I taught English.
Yeah. Where's that book?
I'm a music
book about
major.
geometry?
You're an English major. Vic, what did you study?
I was in the Army.
Okay, so
we're so screwed.
but you're not gonna be getting a perfect 25-degree bevel on everything unless you have a different jig set up to set that rest for each of your blades or for each thickness of blade.
Right.
So it's like I guess if you were starting with brand new blades or whatever, it would really stink to regrind all of your blades to the same bevel angle or to the same grinding position. But
why would you do that?
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Because of not wanting to ever move your grinder rest, right?
Yeah, but I'm not going to grind a brand new blade. I know. I'm just going to hone it and sharpen it and hone it.
I know.
Hone it and polish it. What are those words? I don't know. Words.
That's on you, Megan.
I know. Sorry.
But yeah, so it just doesn't seem like it's worth really fretting about.
Well,
so the answer is yes, do that.
Yes, 25 do what you were planning. Yeah. And while we're on a soapbox about not caring about angles, I don't even notice a difference in performance from a plane or the surface you get from it in 5-degree increments when you're using a bevel up plane. The only time I notice a difference in performance and surface is like with 10-degree jumps. So like to my mind, if you have a low angle plane, a medium angle plane, and a high angle plane, that's really all you need. And it needs to be somewhere in the, somewhere in the 25-degree range for end grain kind of work, somewhere in the, kind of, and I'm talking bevel ups now. So 35 plus the bed angle would get you to like 42-ish. And then,
0.2.
Yeah, 0.2. And then high angle to do any sort of like gnarly hardwood stuff that maybe you want to work with. But I mean, like to say I prefer 47.5 is ridiculous because what's the margin of error on the measuring tool you're using?
Listen,
right?
If you haven't tried 47.5, don't knock it. All right.
We're going to start our own forum and we can just...
No, I'm not. Nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I hear that.
So I sharpen absolutely everything but one thing in my shop to 30 degrees. Everything gets sharpened at 30 degrees. And then I have one, like the little teeny tiny Veritas stainless steel apron plane or whatever. It drives me nuts. The blade is tapered on the side.
Yeah, it is.
So I can hold it in my Lee Nielsen at 40 degrees. So I think that's what that's sharpened at.
That's the only one I sharpen by hand, actually. I have it too.
It's a great plane otherwise. But yeah, I've stopped caring. It's just 30 degrees for everything.
Does it cut the wood? Yay.
Well, and I think that part of what happens is that like we've all worked with hand tools a lot in our past, and we understand that as you use tools, you start to understand what's important and what's not important.
Yep.
And so I find that a lot of neophyte hand tool users sort of try to make up for the lack of experience with sort of like trying to be ultra precise about angles and it needs to be this, and I'm still getting tear out. I wonder why. Well, because you don't know how to sharpen yet. And so I think that a lot of those discussions kind of tend to go around people who just don't have time on the tools. And that's not I'm not trying to be disparaging. Yeah. I'm just saying that you get a certain amount of understanding as you do stuff. And as you realize 30 degrees is a pretty darn good angle for an awful lot of processes in woodworking, and so I think that's part of it as well. So I always try to like get people to pump the brakes on all the conversations about, angles and how much and whether hollow grind is better than flat grind and all that other stuff, because it really, really doesn't matter.
Right.
True. As long as you get sharp.
That's it.
I want to point out that Megan, you wrote a blog for us a while back about grinding.
I did.
And it was really good. So if anyone is curious about Megan's grinding process.
Regular old grinder.
Yep.
Cheap one. Well, that's actually not a cheap one, but you can get a cheap one.
Sure. Yeah. I will link to that in the show notes, because I don't know how you got the pictures for that one. Did somebody else take the pictures for you? Because the pictures were really good.
Yes,
Magic.
they were from really high up.
Yeah.
So who do you think took them? There you go, Chris. Right?
You've got the fancy antique ladder. I don't know.
I've also got the fancy lad in the shop, so he can do it. Right?
Tall, dark, and lanky.
That's right.
Voice activated tripod.
Exactly right.
All right, let's take a quick break.
If you love this podcast, you'll love Fine Woodworking Unlimited. Access more than 40 years of articles, how-to videos, and project plans designed to take your craft to the next level. Check it out.
This week, I have an all-time favorite tool of all time for this week. It is, I've been experimenting with metric for quite a while now.
Attaboy.
And it's pretty great. And I went to this weird little hardware store in Middletown, Connecticut. And it was one of those situations where it was like, oh, hardware store, I've got time to kill. That's where I'm going. And the owner or somebody was immediately there in the doorway. And I walked in and it was, okay, don't ask him if they're going out of business. Don't do it. Like, the store was just about entirely empty. And so it was like, okay, you have to now find something to buy from this guy, because you're probably it today. And so I'm walking around, I'm looking for stuff, and it was an old school hardware store that I think is not long for the world, but unfortunately. But all of a sudden, I come across a display case along the wall filled with Starrett. It was a whole wall of Starrett micrometers, calipers, dividers, rules. This type of, you don't see these in mom and pop hardware stores, right? And so I said to the guy, I was like, wow, this is a lot of Starrett. And he goes, yeah, we used to sell to a lot. It's Middletown, Connecticut, which is, you can spit on New Britain, Connecticut, which is where all of the machinists and all of the manufacturers were. Stanley was out of New Britain, Connecticut. He goes, yep, we used to sell to a lot of machinists, and now machinists sit behind a computer, and it was kind of sad. It was sad. And, so I decided, okay, well, this is the case. I'm going to find something to buy it out of, because I can find something I want. And I found it is an 11 3/4 inch rule. It is what Starrett calls metric English. And it's a 300 millimeter rule. And I bought it for $40 and I love it to pieces. It's when you flip it over. So on the bottom, the show face that I'm seeing on one side is standard imperial. And then when I flip it over, the show face I'm seeing on the other side is metric. And a lot of standard or a lot of imperial metric rules do not function that way. It's just, you always get, no matter which way you pick it up, you're seeing the wrong side, the measurement you don't want to see. And I bought it because I figure I keep it at my desk where I do a lot of CAD work. If I'm in Fusion 360, I'm working in metric, and I'm still having a hard time figuring out what 270 millimeters looks like. So I figured this would be great to keep on my desk. But now
it's 11 inches, by the way.
I can't tell on this ruler.
Because you don't have two scales.
Well, no, because the scales are opposite. It's not good for that. I just found out. It's not good for conversions, but it just I'm just carrying it all over the shop, and now I think I need to buy the 6-inch version to actually keep in my apron, and it's going to become a go-to now. So that's
cool.
That's my all-time favorite tool of all time for this week. Vic, do you have anything?
That brings me a crazy amount of joy to hear you talk about metric like that.
I've been metric for longer than most people think.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I had a conversation with somebody this week about metric, and they were saying that they tend to stick with imperial measurements for anything bigger than 300 millimeters or a foot. And that whenever they're working with anything smaller, they tend to switch to metric, which for me, that would be difficult because you're like constantly going between two languages. But yeah, no, that's cool. I'm glad that you're embracing the metric ruler. That's cool.
Yeah.
I just don't like measurements at all, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, I agree 100%. If you don't need it, why assign
about
it
that
number?
much?
Yeah, exactly.
Yay big.
So for me, whenever I have to sharpen a blade in a plane, in a metal plane, for me, that's my opportunity to take the blade out and then take a look at the inside of the plane. If there's any, crap and corruption stuck in there, I'll blow it out or suck it out. And then I also check that there's, if anything needs lubrication, if anything looks like it's starting to get a little bit of surface rust or whatever. So I do a little bit of maintenance to the plane when I take a blade out to sharpen, because it's a good time to do it. You've already got it half apart anyway. So years ago, I was in this really cool store. This guy, he had this, it was called Carden Tools. It still is called Carden Tools. And basically, this guy would go out and buy, he would go to estate sales and stuff like that, and he would just buy everything and then bring it into this shop and then liquidate it all. And so he had things like, old Poitras jointers and old general, Canadian general stuff that was made up. And then he'd have a box of 50 end mills, wherever he got them from, he would get them from me. So he had all of these cool little sort of things and little blocks of I bought a 1-inch thick by 12 by 12 inch sheet of Bakelite, which is just this sort of kind of one of the first plastics.
Yeah.
So that's 25 millimeters by 300 by 300. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in this shop, I was talking to him, and he had on his desk this tiny little oiler, and it was this sort of it was a brass oiler, but had been it had a stainless steel finish on it, like a nickel finish on it, and then the people on YouTube will be able to see it, but if you're listening, you're not going to be able to appreciate how cute this is.
Just darling.
That's adorable.
Right? And so this thing, you twist it open, and then it's got the little, listen. Right? And so what this thing allows you to do is when I take apart the adjuster, on a Norris type adjuster, I wipe off all the crud, and then I can literally drop a couple of drops of oil, because if you over oil it, everything just sticks to it and it becomes a nightmare again. This little oiler this thing brings me more joy than I want to actually admit to. Because when I'm working and then it works the way it's supposed to work, it's fantastic. So that's my favorite little tool for this week of all time.
That is the cutest oil.
It is cute. Yeah.
Right?
What kind of oil are you using?
Oh dear.
Oh, that's another sharpening question.
This is my job, is to cut these questions off at the pass.
I use a product called Move It. And so it's basically just it's very similar to a 3-in-1 oil. It is plant-based. And so it won't interfere with finishes. It won't cause you any kind of grief that way. It's a product that's made by a company here in Canada called Lloyd's. And I first kind of heard about them when I was in the service, because we used to use it for all sorts of metal kind of work and things. And so I've just kind of always stuck with it, and it doesn't stink. It's just it's nothing special really. It just oil.
Cool.
Does what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, it does what it's supposed to do. Yeah, it doesn't have any magical qualities. There's no ground unicorn horn or rhino pea in it or anything like that. It's just good old oil.
Yep.
Nice. So, Megan, is your all-time favorite tool of all time for this week still your router?
The router plane? Sure. But I thought of another one because I'm sitting at my desk here.
Okay.
And I just finished making a little shaker tool tray. I had just taught a class in it, and I actually finished a project I started while teaching a class.
Oh,
It's a
right.
miracle.
How do you do that?
I don't know. I just said I'm going to do it. And after I glued it up and put oil on it, I realized there was a little bit of high glue left because I used high glue left in the corner. And I remembered, oh, this is going to be scary. I had this black light and high glue and cat pee for that matter. That's why I really have it. They fluoresce under black light. So if you're using high glue, and you shine a black light in all the corners after you think you've scrubbed everything out, it'll show you if there's any high glue remaining that you need to get off before you put a finish on. So I find this pretty useful. I'd rather find out this way than by putting the finish on and having it not soak in that spot. So this is handy for whenever I'm doing glue up. So I wouldn't say it's my favorite tool, but it's awfully handy.
So just a little ultraviolet flashlight, and you got that at a pet store?
Probably. I think I got this at a pet store because that's what they sell them for.
Yeah. Well, I've actually gone to a hardware store looking for it because we had a workshop tip a few issues ago, and it was the one that wasn't illustrated because it had to illustrate, I guess. Yeah. But it was about some type-on as well, fluoresces.
Yeah, it does
UV
too.
Light. And I thought,
I should say
this would be great.
Glue fluoresces.
Yeah. I wanted to get one and test and see what glues fluoresce under. And at the hardware store, you could get the UV flashlight for curing UV glue.
Yeah, sure.
But it was like $25. I was like, I'm not
buying that.
Come on. That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, pet stores sell them because cats. And dogs.
Well, really, we all do it.
And ferrets, whatever. I don't judge.
But Vic, you know where you're doing it when you do it. You're not having to look for it after.
Listen, right? I'm a guy, right? Don't come claiming the high ground here, Ben. You know better.
I'm keeping my mouth shut. Yeah.
There's a reason why we're taught to put the seat up. Let's just say that.
This degenerated quickly.
Yeah.
Bound to happen.
Are you surprised, really?
No.
Let me revise that. 0.5 millimeter pencil, very handy. Fits right into the knife line groove and hits both sides of it. So you get two lines and then you can split them with your saw. Much better choice than a UV light. So do something gross with that.
Do something gross with that.
Just give us a
minute. Challenge our audience. Do not challenge our audience.
You two. Not the audience. You two. Take that to a bad place.
Let's move on to the last question.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want to do which one do you want to do, Megan? Because Victor.
The dovetails. That's all I teach, basically.
Where's that one?
The rabbeting.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. All right. Okay. Last question is from Darren. Hello, Shop Talk. I don't know why I went to a different voice.
Hello, Darren. Sorry.
Hello there.
That was very Ewan McGregor. I've been woodworking for many years, and I have somehow.
Sorry.
I was actually shooting for Newman from Seinfeld.
She's the one that's. Hello, Darren.
Hello, Jerry.
That was good. That was a little creepy.
Pretty good.
I've been woodworking for many years, and I've somehow got away without cutting any dovetails. I would like to fix that, and I've given myself a goal this year to learn how to cut them. I noticed in some videos that the person uses a small rabbet to align the tailboard over the pinboard during the transfer. In many of the videos, I see them using a rabbet block plane. I have a couple of questions. Do you suggest this method to align the tailboard? Is the only reason for aligning? If so, I have a record number 778 Philister plane, a record 311 shoulder plane, and a chisel. Is there a preferred method for cutting this rabbet, and what depth? So do either of you cut a rabbet with your dovetails?
Sometimes.
I don't usually.
More often, though, when I'm on really large projects, like, I don't know, an anarchist tool chest, we actually now extrude a rabbet. So by which I mean we tack a straight edge at the baseline, because that way it's easy to pull it into position and register it in place. It's actually incredibly difficult for beginning, and I teach a lot of beginners, for beginning woodworkers, dovetailers, to cut a rabbet that is flat. And if it's not, you've made your life so much harder by doing this thing that's supposed to make it easier. So I almost never have students in classes cut rabbets anymore, because that usually eats up an entire day and trying to chase flat. And you don't need anything more than, a 16th is plenty. It just needs to be enough to register it in place. So what's easier is to just like take a straight edge and tack it at the baseline, and you get 2 little pinholes on the inside of the tool chest or whatever the project is, but so what? You never see them. And that is usually far more successful than trying to cut a rabbet. That said, if you do cut a rabbet, just very shallow, all it has to do is feel the mating board and catch on it. I use a rabbet plane for that. You can use whatever method you want, but it does have to be flat. It does have to be true. So I would say no to the chisel. I'm not good enough with the chisel to cut a perfect 90 that's flat all the way across. The only one benefit of it is that it will hide any little tiny gap there when they do come together at the end. But unless you're sticking your head down inside and looking at it, I don't really see a benefit there. So yes, you can cut a rabbet very shallow, but it's easier not to, and just to tack something on if you do need that positive registration to feel where to align things.
So if it's not flat, you're going to have a hard time getting in there and transferring with a knife or something. Or what's the downside of the flatness of it?
Well, it's not going to be level. I mean, you can't get a good transfer, and it's not going to go together right. So because you're not going to have a solid surface. It's going to be like that, or usually like that instead of like that. But
okay, cool. I've never thought of the flatness of the rabbet being an issue. That makes
that's really hard to do if you're new to it.
It looks so easy.
I know.
What you don't ever see is the 15 minutes of plane setup that happened beforehand, getting the blade perfectly aligned and perfectly parallel in the mouth and like all of that stuff. Yeah. I'm with Megan on this. I think that, for somebody who's new to dovetails, that's a really good way to sort of make it much harder to learn. It's, I like the extruded one though. That's a cool little technique. I like saying
extruded.
Yeah.
I immediately went into like SketchUp mode.
That's right.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, you need to roll the R though, so it's like extruded. It just sounds better. I don't know. But yeah, I think being able to have something to work up against, and I know that Mike Pekovich uses a very similar method where he clamps on that board that's basically like a thin piece of plywood with a
same idea
on it. Same idea. And I think that's a lot better.
He just uses clamps.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So the nice thing is that either way, you're going to sort of guarantee a good registration, and without the risk of like having a rabbet be a little bit of a problem. So I typically would not do the rabbet just because it'd be an extra step that I wouldn't be willing to do. That's all.
Right. It adds time too. I don't do it on I don't do anything on a smaller project, but if I'm building a big tool chest and you're paying me to do it really well, I'm going to give myself the advantage of that perhaps, but I don't usually have to anymore. So.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing too, right? Like once you cut a certain amount of dovetails.
So.
Yeah. Once you've done it for a little while, you don't sort of, you watch the Frank Klaus video where he's like, he doesn't mark anything. There's not a single mark on his board, and he's just giving her, and all of a sudden it comes together and it works. So it's like, that
I'll
guy's
never be able to do that, but
he's been doing it for 100 years or so. No disrespect to Frank. I'm sure he's not 150, but, but I mean, it's like he obviously has spent a lot of time with that saw in his hands, and he knows what he's doing. And so, I think the rabbet is, I agree with your your comment though, Megan, about hiding little sort of blemishes, if that's something that you're worried about. Because if you slightly overcut the line a little bit, or you've gone just below your depth line, then you can see that. I'm like sort of Christian Becksford camp of dovetails, where it's like, go ahead, saw all the way onto the inside of those blinds. Who cares?
I do too. Yeah.
Because it's like, come on, like let's not be too dear about this, right?
Right.
Doesn't the rabbet also give you another marking gauge another marking gauge measurement or whatever to juggle? Because
technically you should be measuring the mating board off of its mate all the time anyway, but sure. Yes, it does.
Yeah. It just seems like one more thing to think about. And whereas if you're extruding, I mean, this is what we're going to, we got to make extruding a rabbet.
Let me be clear here. I stole this from Chris. I did not come up with this.
Okay. All right. Well, down yonder, they extrude their rabbets. And
y'all can do what you want, but I like to extrude mine. So
I've been extruding rabbits all my life.
That's right.
But with
no disrespect to the South, I'm from the shallow South. Let me just say.
I'm just culturally appropriating your accent.
It's my own.
I'm not doing it. That was Vic. Get mad at the Canadian. But yeah, if you extrude the rabbet, your stock is still all the same thickness. Everything is all the measurements line up. There's nothing to think about, and you've got two little witness marks. Good, but... Okay, all right.
But yes,
these are assumptions I prefer to make.
Right.
Yeah. All right, now it is time for the live call-in. So here's Vic, myself, and listener Antonio. I live in Buffalo, New York, and weather is a factor in my question about the need for a new shop. My wife and I are soon to move into a new house, and I'm a little torn on what I want to do for my shop space. I'm a hobby woodworker with a fairly good setup right now in a detached single-car garage that is too small to house either of our cars, thereby giving me the latitude to put my workshop out there. I have a standard handful of larger tools, table saw, planer, small bandsaw, sander, blah, 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 blah. With the addition of a couple of rolling toolboxes for hand tools, planes, chisels. Ideally, I'd like to add a couple other larger tools like a joiner, upgraded bandsaw, saw stop in the future. We all do. In the new house, there's an attached garage with no outbuilding large enough to hold my tools and for the intended furniture making. My dilemma is, do I set up my small attached garage with easy access to wiring, adding 220 volt, as well as the ability to add some sort of heating when the budget will allow, and keep everything on wheels? Since we would like to use the garage for car storage in the winter by pushing all the tools against the wall when needed. Also making it easier as well, increasing my willingness to go out to the garage on the 5 or so months below optimal shop temperatures. That's a big one. Mm-hmm. I would like to get this set up quickly and without much effort from my current setup. The main downside is that it is directly below where our son's bedroom will be. Keep in mind, my woodworking will be mostly nights and weekends, escaping on what feels like borrowed time. I feel that one with my soul. Or do I put in short-term efforts into building a substantially sized shed outbuilding to be the primary shop location? Luckily, I have the yard space, and the budget could likely be agreed upon by the better half. But this would be a full ground-up build, electrical foundation, literally everything. But this could be a dedicated space, exactly to my specs, the downside of which would be heating or getting it to a comfortable temperature during the aforementioned winter months, and for short periods of time may be difficult to heat, thereby decreasing my likelihood of actually going out when it's cold. So, Antonio is with us.
Because
thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, we read this and we're like, this is a great question, and this applies to so many people. Everybody's situation is a little bit different, of course, but it was like, we can't answer this without talking to Antonio. So let's bring him on.
Fantastic.
So are you in Buffalo right now?
I am, yeah. Actually, and right now it's fantastic. Like I was away when you emailed me, Ben. I was away in actually North Carolina, just sweating my butt off for a little guys' weekend that I do with a bunch of college buddies for a little golf trip every year. But Buffalo's been good. It's been solid for the last few months. But man, that like mid-November to like mid-March timeframe, it just sucks. Like it's just cold. I mean, it's exactly what you guys are experiencing. I mean, Vic, you get it in Burlington, right? Like, I mean, it's exactly the same. It's all the lake effect stuff. It's all the the cold air coming off the lake. It's rough.
Well, I'd be willing to bet that you get more snow than Vic does. Don't you think, Vic, with the lake effect?
Yeah, you would do for sure. Yeah. Like even though we're on the same lake, like I could probably go out here and look across the lake at you.
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, no, it's definitely, the need for heat, kind of surpasses the need for air conditioning in a lot of cases because, you can kind of get away without either. You can get away without the air conditioning because it's a short amount of time.
Right.
But heat, it starts getting cold in November and then it doesn't let up until like Marchish kind of thing. So personally, I think you've got two really good options right there. Like, I mean, the garage as it stands, the thing I've gotten to a point now where I have gotten so soft in my old age that I refuse to work in a shop that is not air conditioned and heated. Because quite frankly, I spent 14 years in the Army where I was uncomfortable for all 14 of those years, and I'm not doing that anymore. And so what we ended up using was one of those split units where basically it does your heating and your cooling for you at the same time, mounts on the ceiling. The guts of it are outside the building. And I've had that in this shop now for a few years, and it's fantastic. You can set it up really well. If it gets really humid, which I'm sure it does in the summertime like it does here, I also added a dehumidifier because the cooling unit does a pretty good job. It'll bring the temperature down, but it won't bring the humidity down because that's a lot of work for it. And so, but just by simply adding a dehumidifier to the mix, you get really, really good results.
And
what do you think, Ben?
Like June, July, August, Vic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like I run it for about 3 months, and they're pretty energy efficient, provided that the building is energy efficient. If you don't have an insulated door like on your garage, that makes a huge difference for heating and cooling.
Sure.
Just having that there. But yeah, the heat, like I can work in here until about 10 degrees Celsius. I'm sorry, I don't know what that is in American. That's 52. Okay, so I can work in this environment. I'll have like a little a hat on, a beanie. You guys call it. We call it a toque. But actually, in Buffalo, you probably call it a toque. I don't know. Yeah. I feel like you're close enough that you would.
We're close enough, man. We're close enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't mind that, but like when it starts to get warm, that's when I start to get uncomfortable.
Sure.
And then the air conditioning comes on.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think the real question is, so you're going to heat it one way or another, right?
Right.
That seems like, mini split. Everyone I know has got one. I'm jonesing for the day I can get one. But you've got basically your option of being in the garage where you have to move stuff around. But do you think that, and you have a 2-year-old?
Yeah, just over 2.
Okay. Do you think that you would be able to set up a space, like a bench area that doesn't have to get rolled away?
So we're not in the house yet, right? So just from the few times that we've been in there, that's probably, so yes, short answer to your question is yes, I can probably set up a space in the garage, where like right now I just work off of like a large, kind of assembly / outfeed table for my, mid-grade, rigid table saw, which is a great, it's a good setup, for what it is right now. I think I could probably tuck that into, or at least against one of the walls and only move it, when I need to get to the drawers on the other side, and the off chance I need that stuff. And that has a router table buried in the table as well. So yeah, I think that's probably going to be, fixed in one spot for the most part, unless I'm doing like big stuff coming off the table saw. And I roll the table saw to the middle of the garage and use that as my outfeed table. But then my other thought was I could also probably just throw an extra bench in the basement for like hand tool work. You know what I mean? So that was kind of,
for me with a young kid, a 2-year-old, I don't know. So yeah, you've got like the ability to be close to hear something if needed, whatever. But then also you've got the problem where any sound, any work you do might wake the kid up.
Right.
But it's entirely different if you have a bench set up that you can just sneak out and do something real quick. And that's the thing that I would never want to lose in my shop situation, is just the ability to go like, okay, my son's watching TV, playing video games, my wife's working, and they're like, you got that moment where you're going, there's nothing for me to do in the house. Okay, I'm running outside, and
when you're not being supervised.
But the ability to throw an extra coat of finish on, the ability to go outside and just do like that 5-minute task that's going to trip you up when you start to do something next time. Yep. Whatever you do, I would really recommend just trying to make sure that you've got some sort of a bench spot that you can work in. I don't know about split. And Vic, have you ever worked in a split situation where you have hand tools in one spot and your other stuff in another?
Yeah. Well, actually, when I was the resident craftsman at Rosewood, they had a machine room and they had a bench room. And so I actually didn't like that. And I was going to kind of make that comment that I like being able to, because sometimes you'll be doing something at your bench and like you need the bandsaw for a quick second or, whatever. And so then when I was talking about the heating aspect of it, that was sort of my convoluted way of getting to what I would really do, and that is, of course, a standalone. Because if you've got the ability and the space and the buy-in to do a standalone, then that is completely separate of the home. So no matter what's happening inside the house, you can always go and like Ben was saying, like you can throw a little bit of finish on something and then come back in or whatever. And I mean, it's not like it's a long commute. I mean, my commute to the house is about 50 meters at most. And so for me,
3.4 miles.
What is a mile again? What is that? 1,600 feet? Is that what it is?
It's freedom.
5,000.
How many feet?
5,280.
Yeah, 5,000. Yeah, that's right.
That's an awesome system.
I didn't want to nerd out and give you the exact number.
That's an awesome system you guys have got.
Yeah.
Anyway. But anyhow, the nice thing about having that standalone place is that you're still going to need to heat and cool it, right?
Sure.
And the mini split is awesome for that. But then when you start to think about like an existing space versus a purpose-built space, you can basically do what you want with it. Right. And you can decide how you want to do your dust collection. Some people will put it up on stilts and run their dust collection under. So that everything's coming out of the floor as opposed to like up on the ceiling and all that other stuff. There's so many different options that you can choose, and it doesn't need to be massive. What's the size of your shop currently? Is it a 1-car, right?
Yeah, it's a 1-car. I think if I had to give it a square footage, it's probably, I want to say it's like 9 by 20, but the last 4 or 5 feet all the way in the back is really just like storage and like stationary tool storage. So, but I can't even stand up, in the back of the back of the space. So it's really 9 by 16 of usable shop space. So call it, a couple hundred square feet total.
And if you were building, you would build bigger than that, I assume.
Yeah, I would probably go like a 10 by 20 or as big as the township would let me without throwing up a lot of red. It's not a development, but it is a neighborhood, right? So I'm sure there's I'm going to run into the permitting aspect of that,
Well, maybe you want to look into that before. And another thing to think about is those big sheds that you can get delivered. They're, basically a single car garage. We have an article, Ken, there was an editor here who did that. And for a while I was thinking about doing the same thing as getting a building delivered and using this as a garage. And then we realized that the doors aren't wide enough to fit cars in. And then I was able to talk my wife out of getting a car in a shop or in a garage at all. But in Buffalo, that's a different conversation, I think.
Yeah. It's tricky. It's tough. And again, I'm fortunate that my wife is like, well, we could, park outside for part of the time or most of the time and, tuck the machines away when needed. But I think it's also like my own mental hurdle trying to get over, like, okay, do I want to get up and dust off a car, so I can, and then it just, everything just like I wrote in the email, right? It all kind of compiles and it's like, okay, I'm doing all these things. Should I just be building the outbuilding? So,
well, and I mean, to me, all of your shop time is like stolen time thing. Just rang. It's like, if you can swing it to do an extra building that you can just run out to and not have to set anything up, I think Vic's right. Just do it. Because if half of your, if you find yourself with 30 minutes and half of that time is spent setting stuff up, that's going to get frustrating real fast.
Yeah, I agree. Like, and I mean, really, like, there's no, like, having a standalone shop, you've kind of, like, I mean, as far as like woodworking street cred goes, I mean, you pretty much have like hit the very tip top, because like the goal is to have a standalone shop with windows and like all that other stuff. And so like, you could be the envy of everybody.
The goal is a standalone shop with air conditioning and a bathroom.
Oh, like, I don't have a bathroom, but I have a tree.
That's got to be nirvana.
Yeah. I don't have a bathroom. I have a tree.
I have trees, but I'm real close to the road.
Right.
Well, I'm sure we probably just served to confuse you more, Antonio. I don't know.
No, this was helpful. I will admit, like, I think I'd like to say that I know where I'm leaning at this point, but I think it'll be one of those things where, like, once I get in there and I really, kind of get the lay of the land, and then, is a outbuilding that's just, prefabbed and, dropped right on site the way to go, or, that's, a lot to consider. So I think the next 3 months will be very, very telling as far as,
So like with this, we're bringing you in, and now I want to kind of throw it out there to other people. Has anyone out there done a prefab single bay garage shop? And what was that experience like? Let us know in the comments. And then also, like, let us know if you were in that type of situation, because I'm sure there are other people who have, like, done this same juggling act. Let us know the important things that weighed into your decision and how you would go about doing it differently if you were to do it again. I mean, I was really lucky, Vic. I think you're lucky. You had that spot there. I had this spot that wasn't good for much else. But I've been in the basement shop, like, trying not to wake up the baby, and it's hard. Yep. And that's the part that, like, I don't see a way around, because it's going to be a few more years until you're not worried about waking that kid up. So
yeah.
My daughter used to get lulled to sleep by the sound of a router. So I think she still falls asleep if she hears a router in here running. But
I know that's just vicinity to her father.
That's it.
All right. Well, Antonio, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, guys. This was great. Bye-bye.
Well, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Thank you again to Megan for joining us. It's always a blast having her on. Thank you for Antonio for braving the heat and coming on the show. I hope we helped a little bit. If you have questions you'd like answered on Shop Talk Live, please send them into shoptalk@taunton.com. If you're watching on YouTube, click that thumbs up button and do us a favor. If you have a woodworking buddy, tell them about Shop Talk. Make sure they're listening. All right, we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening. I have a couple of questions. Do you suggest this method of pairing to align the tailboard, or is it, or blah, I'm gonna edit that one out.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Oh my goodness, what's happening right now?
Vic, leave me alone. Don't look at me. Look away.
He's normally not like this. I think it's you, Megan.